Welcome to another Talking Feds one-on-one. We are only 3 weeks into the new administration, and Trump is wreaking havoc, not just domestically, but internationally. Foreign policy scholars all understand that the United States' preeminent position and influence in the world depends on far more than its raw might. But that lesson seems entirely lost on Trump, and his bull in a china shop approach to international relations already has gravely undermined our ability to influence world affairs. Or so is the position of our guest today. To consider the grave impact of just 3 weeks of Trump rule on the international scene, we're really fortunate to welcome Max Boot, a Washington Post columnist, senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. He is a Pulitzer Prize finalist in biography and the author most recently of the New York Times bestseller, Reagan, His Life and Legend. But his latest article, which I was hoping to talk to him about, is entitled, U.S. Soft Power Took Decades to Build. Trump is Dismantling It in Weeks. Max, thank you for joining.
Always a pleasure.
So the premise of your article is that it's the United States soft power rather than military muscle that explains our preeminent influence in the world. Can you just briefly explain the concept of soft power a little bit more and how we historically, at least say since Reagan, have exercised it?
Well, soft power was a term that was coined by Joe Nye, the Harvard political scientist, to describe the ability of a nation to get others to do what you want without using military power or economic coercion, basically because they want to help you because they like you. They're attracted to you. And that's, I think, been a key element of US power really since the beginning of the Republic, when we have stood as kind of a beacon of hope and freedom to the rest of the world. And, I think we've increased our attractiveness with actions such as the Marshall Plan after World War II, where we spent a lot of money to help Europe rebuild from the ravages of war, or in more recent decades with PEPFAR, the program that President George W. Bush started to provide life-saving aid to victims of AIDS all over the world. All those things, I think, increase support for the United States around the world and make it easier for us to get our way when we need something, whether it's, a military base or, to get our way in some kind of trade issue or whatever it might be. If people like you and support you, they're more liable to work with you. And unfortunately, I think that's something that Donald Trump is not really focused on. I mean, he's all about hard power, and in particular about using the power of tariffs to coerce other nations into doing what we want. Although the result of that, as we've seen in recent weeks, is often nationalist backlashes and the rise of anti-Americanism in countries like Mexico and Canada, which are two of our closest allies and trade partners. And I fear that, as part of this kind of chaotic opening to the Trump administration, we are doing perhaps permanent damage to our soft power. And especially when you look at what's happening to foreign aid, which is getting decimated. The U.S. Agency for International Development has been all but destroyed in a few weeks. And that's going to have dire consequences around the world, in particular for a lot of people who depend on U.S. aid to stay alive, whether it's, food aid to combat malnutrition and starvation, or whether it's medicines to combat deadly diseases. A lot of people depend on that aid, but it's not just an act of charity to the United States. It's also a way that we can exert power, and we do things like helping governments around the world to expand their capacity so they can deal with terrorists and criminals and other issues that threaten the United States. So we don't have to send our troops to deal with it. And of course, they're more likely to help us on those issues, on provide cooperation on terrorism or, whatever issue you name, if they know that we're doing so much for their own people. And conversely, if they know that we're abandoning their people and we're acting like this high-handed bully, that's going to do a lot of damage to U.S. interests. And it's, of course, going to immediately hurt a lot of innocent people around the world. But ultimately, it's going to, I think, hurt the U.S. and our ability to project power and defend our interests.
Yeah, and we'll get back to that. But just on the immediate harm, so the abruptness and the comprehensiveness of the shutoff of aid, or the attempted. We'll see if the courts are able to push back there, but is creating anecdote after anecdote of real sort of human tragedy. I want to double back for a second on soft power, and just it's my understanding, Max, it's not there's been ebb and flows in different administrations for degree of enthusiasm and the like, but the basic notion of being really dedicated to the exercise of soft power really isn't controversial. President after president, party after party have all adopted it, and it's been a steady refrain in the U.S.'s role in the world, and again, preeminent role in the world for our lifetimes. Yes, it's
Oh,
there's no
absolutely, yeah.
controversy here. Yeah,
No, I mean, absolutely. I think this was part of the bipartisan consensus on U.S. foreign policy after World War II. This notion that, we can't just take an America first approach. We can't shelter behind our oceans and wait to do something until you see the rise of Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan, that we have to take a more active role in shaping the world. And this is something we've done since World War II with a completely bipartisan consensus. And even, it's kind of ironic because Marco Rubio, now the Secretary of State, as a senator, he championed foreign aid, he championed
right,
USAID, as have many Republicans, because they see it quite rightly as the most effective way that the United States can combat, for example, China and their Belt and Road Initiative, which is development aid that they provide all over the world with a lot of strings attached. And basically, they're trying to draw countries into their Chinese sphere of influence by providing this development aid. And I think a lot of there's been a bipartisan consensus, including, most of the Republicans in Congress, who have said, hey, we got to counter this by providing our own development aid, our own humanitarian assistance. These are things that we're doing in our own self-interest. And so it's been, at some level, foreign aid has often been controversial because people vastly exaggerate how much we give. It's actually less than 1% of the federal
right.
budget. Surveys show that people think it's like a third of the budget or something. It's actually, it's a lot of money in absolute terms, but it's a small percentage of the federal budget. And as a percentage of our total economy, it's much smaller than what most of our allies in Europe and elsewhere provide. So this is actually a fairly small investment with a potentially big return. And I think that's something that Democrats and Republicans have long recognized. And so it's been, I mean, I'm not even, frankly, I'm not even sure that Trump himself set out to destroy foreign aid. It seems like this was an Elon Musk initiative, which Trump has then backed up. And now, all these Republicans who have long supported foreign aid, have long supported USAID, are, in a weird situation where they're kind of, they're unhappy about what's going on, but they're afraid to speak out loudly for fear of, getting in Trump's crosshairs. So it's a very unfortunate and unnecessary place where we're winding up.
Yeah, I've given up long since psychoanalyzing Trump, but it does seem very much of a piece with his overall strongman approach, because what it does is empower him. The tariffs are a good example. He can, with in this basically stagecraft with Mexico and Canada, they didn't really make concessions. It looked like they did, and he could beat his chest and declare victory. So he gets to play the sort of strong man, which I do think is a role he cherishes. The most sort of frightening aspect of what you write, Max, is the suggestion that, but you can see it in, you nurture these sort of soft power relationships over decades. Look at us, at the success, say, of our bipartisan relationship with Japan or Germany, and then the notion that almost like happens in the world, a law of thermodynamics or something, it can just be so beaten up in a permanent way. What do you see as the reason? Say, let's analyze it there. So yeah, he totally undermines this whole aspect of our foreign policy. Why wouldn't it be the case that, we take a deep breath, and then at least when he's gone from the scene, we can return to it? You actually foresee a prospect of a permanent and pretty grave damage to our international influence. Can you flesh that out?
Well, it's very hard to restart these programs 4 years down the road if they've been killed right now. And in fact, even pausing the aid for a few weeks is having deleterious and possibly deadly consequences because, I mean, you're literally cutting off people from food that they need to survive. You're cutting them off from medicines they need to survive. You can't just say, like, oh, we'll feed you 4 years from now.
Right.
Good luck in the
Right.
meantime. They're not going to be alive in 4 years. I mean, that's the problem. And a lot of countries around the world in very unstable situations can very quickly unravel in providing openings for terrorists and rogue regimes and who knows what else, because one of the key stabilizing pillars of their societies, which is US aid, is suddenly being yanked out. It's very hard to, it's like, after all this damage is done, it's very, I mean, yeah, maybe if a Democrat wins like 4 years from now, we'll try to resurrect all these policies. But in the meantime, a lot of people would have suffered irreparable damage, and US, foreign policy and standing in the world would have suffered a lot of damage at the same time as well.
You write that you think the major beneficiary of these short-sighted withdrawal of soft power is China. Can you flesh that out for us?
Yeah, because we're in a global competition with China, kind of like the way we were with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And China is expanding all over the place in South America and Africa, Southeast Asia. They're trying to expand their influence. And when they get influence, they want to get military bases. It's kind of a very similar strategy to what we've been doing for many decades, except they're pursuing a very illiberal authoritarian vision of power, which is the basis of their political system. And so if we're not providing aid, they're going to step in, they're going to gain more influence. If we're seen as an unreliable ally and trade partner, China's going to come in. And, one of the big US advantages has been that, China is such a bully. They're so heavy-handed and with their so-called wolf warrior diplomacy that they alienate a lot of people. And
Yeah.
they've actually launched a lot of these trade wars against other countries when those countries do stuff they don't like. Like, Australia asks for an investigation of the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic, and China responds, they go psycho. They impose massive restrictions on Australian exports to China, beef, wine, what have you. And that creates a backlash in countries like Australia, where you see like public opinion about China has gone from way up here to way down here. Countries don't like being bullied. And so that's been a big US advantage. When countries like Australia or South Korea don't like being bullied by China, they turn to the United States. And our relationships with both of those countries have gotten much closer in recent years, in part because of Chinese bullying. So now imagine like what happens when the US is doing the bullying. You're going to see the dynamic go in reverse, where a lot of countries will say, like, I can't rely on the US anymore. We could have these massive tariffs next week and I have no control over it. It could devastate my economy. So we have to spread our risk around. We have to turn to China and get closer relationships with China to offset, this mercurial and capricious president who now runs the United States of America. And so, you can see how China's. By the way, there's a reason why China and Russia have been so antithetical to USAID. Their propaganda constantly denigrates USAID because they know that these programs undermine their own power, these authoritarian regimes. They know that US foreign aid is a counter to their power grab. So they're really delighted when the US pulls back because it creates a vacuum that they can come in and fill.
Yeah, I mean, aid with brutal strings attached beats no aid at all if that's the way we're going. You suggested in passing up top, Max, that this really the whole withdrawal somehow especially serves the interests of the mysterious co-president Elon Musk. Can you kind of flesh out what your concerns are there? And I mean, his role in general, not to mention his constitutional status, is enigmatic, but richest man in the world, all kinds of interests with China and Russia. Why would this be something that he would champion?
That's a great question to which I don't think we've gotten a straight answer. I mean, to be clear, Trump did not run for office saying, I will destroy USAID, I will end US foreign aid. I mean, if he said that, I missed it. I don't remember him ever saying that. All he said is we will have an America first policy. We will stop getting taken advantage of. But what that actually means in practice, who knows? But it was for some reason, Musk, with his extraordinary kind of extra constitutional role, went in and decided that he was going to quote unquote feed USID into the wood chipper, which is what he tweeted out. And so, why did he do this? As far as I know, Trump never said, Elon, please go destroy USAID. Well,
Right.
I feel like what kind of happened was Musk said, I will destroy USAID. And then Trump said, oh, yeah, great job. Keep at it. But why Musk? I mean, what is Musk's animosity towards USAID? I'm not really sure. I mean, there was a news article just a few days ago suggesting he basically never heard of USAID until a couple of months before, when this right wing troll started, attacking it on X, and so that got him riled up. But why he has chosen to make USAID his first target, I honestly can't say, and I'd love to know more.
Okay. Yeah, there's an analog to all of this to me when in my own sort of legal world where he is completely gleefully kind of ransacking the executive branch. USAID, he crowed about its and CF, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, he crowed about its shuttering, and it's unclear. It certainly seems unlikely that it fits into some kind of thought through economic change of policy that's to the good of the United States interests.
Talking Feds is supported by the Brennan Center for Justice. In this new political era, the Brennan Center will do what they do best: defend the Constitution and the rule of law. They're prepared to fight against presidential overreach and will continue advocating for reforms to resist weaponized government, stop billionaires from corrupting our elections, and ensure every eligible American has the freedom to vote. Stay informed by visiting BrennanCenter.org.
All right, one would think what would happen here. Trump might be singularly dangerous and bullish, but he's not, I think, as you suggest, a great strategist. Typically, you would think statesmen or women in the Senate in particular might step up and explain how benighted this policy is. They seem completely indolent and cowed, as you say. What the heck is going on? Can they not even play any kind of role in foreign policy? You wouldn't think that the Senate would be so afraid to actually weigh in this realm. What's happening there?
Well, I do think the Senate and the House are both very afraid of Trump, but I think it's really, you know, getting back into your area of expertise, I think it's really up to the courts, because I don't think there's a need for the House or the Senate to do much, because they've authorized USAID, they've appropriated the funds for it, and so it's just a question of having the executive branch follow the law, which is that you can't suddenly destroy an authorized department of government without an action of Congress. You can't do it by executive order. And we've now had a judge who's issued an injunction supposedly to stop this assault on AID, but it's not clear that the Trump administration is going to pay attention to what the judge says, and it may in fact almost be too late. So I think it's not. I mean, it would be great if more members of Congress would speak out, especially Republicans who have been so supportive of AID in the
Right.
past. But they and I would love to have. I mean, I would love to have a debate in Congress on the future of AID, because I think that's a debate that supporters of AID will win, because they've consistently won that debate in the past, because Congress has never voted to defund or deauthorize AID. But the problem is the Trump administration is acting lawlessly to do this. And so now the question becomes, how do you stop them from ignoring the law and destroying, something that Congress created and authorized and appropriated money for? Will the courts be sufficiently strong? Will the administration listen to what the courts have to say? At this point, I'm just not sure.
Yeah, and this is, I guess, my bailiwick, but it's what we all learned in third grade. That Congress has created agencies, appropriated money. The executive is supposed to take care to faithfully execute. We talk about it in individual areas, individual derelictions, but the overall kind of arrogant dereliction of just their basic job is pretty breathtaking. And 3 weeks in, we are already, and it's over this issue of grant and aid really at the precipice of what is the ultimate constitutional crisis, where the courts rule and the executive says screw you, and then what? So it's been so quickly we've ripened to this point of crisis. Max, do you see any signs yet? Would we even know if China or Russia were stepping into the breach? We've seen the response of Canadians saying, perplexed is the word we've heard delicately used. We thought we were your good friends. Why are you slapping us around like this? Do we know of any efforts to exploit our foolishness?
That's a great question. I'm sure we'll see it before long. I'm not sure I've seen reporting on examples right now because this is all happening so fast, but I'm sure it'll happen very quickly. And yeah, I mean, I think to your point, I think it's been heartbreaking to see, what's going on with Canada, which is our northern neighbor, to state the obvious. They're, the country we're probably closest to, both literally and morally and in any sense in the world. They've stood with us, from the beaches of Normandy to the fields of Afghanistan, and they can't understand, like, why is the president picking on them? I mean, it was heartbreaking to hear, Canadian basketball and hockey fans booing the playing of the U.S. national anthem.
Right?
That's
not
something I ever expected to hear. Right. So, I mean, it's why alienate like our closest ally in the world? What have they ever done to us? I just don't get it.
The pace and scope of the damage, when you think there's, you put it in your own, in the article, can we possibly withstand, what are we up to, 205 weeks? Okay, well, Max, thanks very much for explaining to date. I hope we can come back to you if it looks like this is even advancing and the damage to our interests becomes more clear. But I really appreciate your explaining to us this clear and present danger. This is not just a policy thing, the clear and present danger to U.S. Role in the world that we've been able to occupy for decades and is now suddenly up for grabs.
Thanks for having me, and keep up the good fight.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.